Thanks, everyone. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Mayur Mekwan. I've been working in the Microsoft technologies for over a decade now, particularly on Microsoft integration-based technologies. Starting my career with BizTalk, just as Sai, I moved up as an architect, and then not recently, lately, about since last 5 years, I've been working on Azure Cloud. And when you go to Azure Cloud, we'll see during the presentation that it's not just integration that you do. When you're on Azure, there are so many other complementary services that you can use and expand your career and your ambitions to many other fields in your career and profession. I'll quickly share my screen and we'll see the agenda that we want to cover for the day. And before I move any forward, thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys joining today. I know it's a Saturday. There are many things you can do on Saturday, right? Anything work related would be your least priority, but I really appreciate you spending your time and joining us today. So in today's agenda, basically, we are going to quickly look into what and why integration. Now, I can understand some of you, for example, Sai already knows what is integration, but for the interest of others who are new to technology or new to integration, we'll quickly look into why do we need integrations. And because all of us are here for the interest of what sort of career you can build on integration, how to build your career with integration roles. So it's really important we understand what is integration and why do we need integration developers. Then we'll also go through Azure Logic Apps, which is one of the services on Azure, which is preeminently used to build any sort of integrations. Now, it's not the only service. Azure Logic Apps is a workflow mechanism which you can use to build integration, and there are many other services on Azure which would eventually use. But Logic Apps is one of the core functionalities. So we'll see what is Logic App. I'll show you a couple of live Logic Apps. How do they look like? What are the benefits? Why you should learn Logic Apps? After that, we'll see what are the career opportunities out there, right? That's the most important part. If you learn Azure Logic Apps, if you want to build your career, you want to be really sure of the career opportunities out there. So we'll just do some job search and we'll see what are the opportunities out there. And then, as I earlier mentioned, that if you become integration developer, you don't just do integration when you're on Azure. There are many other services which you can expand your skill sets. These are complementary services to integration, so you can easily learn and expand your career. And towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, we'll discuss them. By the way, in the meantime, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, there is a link on the top of this presentation, which I've also put in the chat of the Zoom. So you can click that link in the Zoom chat, keep that window open on your computer. Throughout this, if you have any questions, simply ask me a question there or just stop me. You're all allowed to unmute yourself and talk to me whenever you need, right? But feel free to ask any questions there and we'll make sure that we answer all of your questions. After the Q&A session, we'll wrap up and I'll give you some next steps. So once you've learned what is integration, what are Azure Logic Apps, and if you're interested in building your career, then you need to learn more about it, right? So I'll give you some options of how you can learn more about integrations, how you can upskill yourself, what options are out there. Right? So, and then we'll basically wrap up after that. So let's get started, right? The first question is, what is integration? Why do we need integrations? Is everyone okay? Are you able to hear me clearly? Any communications problem before we continue? Or are you all okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Excellent, great. And this is being recorded, by the way, so I will share the link of the recording afterwards. Okay, so let's get started and let's see what is integration. So in order to understand the integrations, I've created a use case, a business case rather, that can help you understand from a user perspective as well as from a developer perspective what is integration. Now, Sai and maybe Ronak, you guys bear with me, you might already know what are integrations. Let's go over the scenario anyway. So here on my left, I have a customer. Consider yourself as a customer. You go to this website called a fancy website called nanazon.com and you order an iPhone, right? So even before you order the iPhone, a lot of integration happens, but let's consider you ordered the iPhone on this website. And for you as a user, what happens is you put in your credit card, your bank details, or your payment details. And then obviously nanazon.com doesn't have its own capabilities to charge your credit card or go to the bank and ask for money. So what they do is they use a payment service provider, right? So they would pass your credit card details to this payment service provider. And God bless if you had that type of money to buy the iPhone. If the payment is approved, you would just get the confirmation email that we've received your order and we'll ship them soon. This is your user journey as a customer, right? Now, once you order your iPhone, what happens behind the scenes? And this happens pretty quick. I mean, in the matter of seconds, all of these things happen. Let's understand one by one what happens. When you order anything on any website or anywhere, it has a system called CRM system, which is the customer relationship management system, right? That's where companies store all of the customers' data, your name, your shipping address, your order history, your preferences, all the customer related data is stored in the CRM system. Considering you are a new customer on this new website, they have to first of all create a new customer so that they can track your activities, they can track your data, they can store your data. So now they have to send your first name, your last name, your email address, your phone number, your addresses, shipping addresses, your payment preferences, everything. They have to send some data to the CRM system. Now, because you ordered the iPhone, they have a system called ERP, which is their enterprise resource planning system. Every big company has an ERP system if they're dealing with any sort of products. So now they have to go and update the inventory. You know what? We had 100 iPhones in stock. One iPhone has been ordered. So let's deduct the inventory. So now we have 99 iPhones left, right? ERP system would hold that product data. So once you made the payment, they also have to update the inventory system. Now, because you ordered, they also need to ship this phone to you. So they have many warehouses across the world where they store all of their products, physical products. And all of the warehouses have some sort of IT systems that needs to now process your order and ship that to you, right? So they also need to send your address details, your name details, your shipping details. Do you want overnight shipping? You've chosen 3 days shipping, whatever is your preference. So now warehouse people can ship that iPhone, the exact model that you've ordered, to your address, right? Now they have a central database where they keep a lot of their data in one place. As soon as they ship, they also need to update the central database that, you know what, now this order status is shipped. So that if you log into this application or their website, you can see that your order has been shipped, right? As soon as you update your inventory, the ERP system also needs to update something in the central database that we've updated the inventory. Now, all of these things happened in a matter of few seconds. And then next day, the business people come in and they want to see what business we did for yesterday. So they use a lot of different systems, but most of them are called business intelligence. They see a lot of reports there. So business intelligence systems, they need to receive all of this data from your central database. Now, all of these arrows that you're seeing, this is all integration. There are data being sent and received between multiple systems, right? It's not the same set of data. It's always different set of data, but all of this data moves between all the systems, right? So there has to be some system in the middle that does this job, right? That is what integration is. I hope the scenario makes it clear for you what is integration. Right? And any questions on what is integrations before I move on?
I hope means you must be covering in next slides, but is there any separate integration server in the backend or like that, or what it is?
Yeah. So right now this is just a business case, but hypothetically speaking, if this was the couple of years ago or a few years ago, there might be a middleware solution, is what it's called, installed somewhere and configured. For example, Bistock server, what Sai is working on is a product from Microsoft, which is the integration server that sits in the middle of all of these systems and does all of these transactions. Right? There is a product from IBM, there is a product from Java side of things, right? But now that all of these systems are in the cloud, we now have to use an integration product that is already in the cloud, right? In the previous world, the CRM system was on premises, right? For example, Siebel is one of the CRM system, which was always on premises. ERP, right? For example, if you've heard JD Edwards or some others, even SAP used to be on premises earlier, right? So you would have to install these systems on premises. But now most of these systems are on the cloud, right? Your CRM system, Dynamics 365, Salesforce, they're all on the cloud. You don't have to install anything, right? Your ERP systems are now on the cloud. All of the warehouse systems are on the cloud. So because all of these systems are on the cloud, you need a service which is also on the cloud and can do this message brokering kind of mechanism, get a message from somewhere and send it to other systems. Right? This is the classical integration scenario. It's there are many scenarios. I'm just picking one scenario which you can relate to as a user as well. Right? So, any other questions? Anyone? Okay. So now the next step, let's look at Azure Logic Apps. So hopefully you know what is integration. So let's look at what is Azure Logic Apps. Now, there are two variations of Logic Apps. Logic Apps is basically a service, platform as a service that is offered by Azure. So you don't have to download anything. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to hire a server. It is there on Azure for you to start designing and start building and start using. There are two variations of Logic Apps, the consumption model and standard model. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to talk about standard Logic Apps. That's little more advanced. But let's just focus on consumption. The Logic App is basically a visual designer for you to design any sort of workflow. So you receive the order, right? There is something for you to receive the order. You don't have to write any code. There is an action, there is a trigger, there is a shape basically that you drag and drop or you select and then you configure. So you receive the order, then next what happens, then next what happens, right? If this value is so and so, then take this action, otherwise take this action. It's all visual flow, right? You can also see the icon of the Logic App that kind of represents that it's a visual workflow designer. You can build workflows, you can build APIs using Logic Apps. You can use Logic Apps to automate tasks without writing any code, right? A very simple task, I would say, is that you receive an email from your manager, and every time you receive an email from your manager, you want an SMS to be sent to your phone, right? You can automate this without writing any single line of code using Logic Apps. Now that's a very basic example, but just an example. Let's say if you are following a hashtag on Twitter and you want to write or you want to automate something that every time someone posts anything with that particular hashtag, you want to be notified by email, right? You can automate that using Logic App without writing any line of code. Logic App development, particularly for the consumption, it's all browser based. So you don't need to download any IDE or Visual Studio or anything. Although you can do Logic App development using Visual Studio Code, but you don't have to. You can start doing your development. You can build, you can test, you can deploy into different environments right on the browser. In the next section, we will see the actual Logic Apps on the browser, right? So it's very easy to develop, build, test, and deploy. What it does is it reduces the development time drastically. That is why a lot of companies have started using this type of tools, right? So instead of spending 4 weeks to build an application, you can now do it in 1 week, maybe even less than that, right? It has out-of-the-box connectors. Now, what are these connectors? When we talk about integrations, you saw in that diagram that you're connecting with many different systems. So in order to connect to that system, you need some sort of mechanism to actually communicate with that system, right? So instead of writing your own mechanism, Logic App already has hundreds of connectors for pretty much any business system that you can think of, right? Consider SAP, Dynamics, or any business system, Salesforce, or Office 365, or anything good, Gmail, or any other system that you can think of. It has out-of-the-box connectors so that you don't have to spend time building the connection. Instead, you start using them immediately. Now, another very critical portion of that is that it connects not only cloud, but you can also use Logic Apps to integrate on-premises systems, right? So as I said earlier, a lot of this system used to be on-premises. Now, most of the systems are in the cloud, but there are still some systems that companies prefer to keep on-premises. Right? Maybe they are quite legacy system. Maybe they have a lot of data, a lot of business processes. So a lot of companies don't want to migrate all of these systems to the cloud. You can still use Logic App, which is essentially a cloud service, to make a connection to your on-premises without a lot of effort. Right? There are, again, out-of-the-box services that you can use there. And the biggest reason a lot of small and medium scale companies use Logic App is that you only have to pay for what you use. What it means that in the BizTalk world, for example, you had BizTalk server, which is the integration server on premises. Companies would have to scope their capacity, that how much load we would need, and based on that they would have to buy the licenses from Microsoft, which is very costly affair, and then have a lot of hardware systems for their peak performance, which is only few times a year. But they still have to build all of this capacity, buy all the licenses, whether they use those capacity or not. Whereas in the case of Logic Apps and on Azure, you build the Logic app, but you only pay when you use it. And it's elastic. What it means is that, let's say you receive 100 orders per day right now, so you only pay for 100 executions of the Logic apps. Let's say if there is a holiday season coming up, and instead of 100, you all of a sudden start receiving 1,000 orders, right? You don't have to worry about the infrastructure, that it would get overloaded, or your performance. Azure would automatically scale the resources, and you would pay for 1,000 orders for that day. In next day, if it goes back to 100 orders, then you start paying for the 100 orders, right? So you pay for only what you use. That is why it is called consumption, right? This is one of the biggest benefit of Logic App. Now, these are some pointers to identify Logic Apps. In the next step, I'm going to show you the actual Logic App. Now, before we go there, any questions so far? Okay, all right. So in the next step, let's look at a Logic App demo. So I have some Logic Apps that I've recently built. I'm just going to show you how it looks like, right? And that would give you a kind of idea of when we talk about building Logic Apps on Visual Designer and on your browser, what it actually means. So I'll go to my Azure portal. I'm on this portal.azure.com. You can create a free account. By the way, Microsoft offers a free account with $200 credits for 1 month. So if you want to try out any of these services, you can create a free account on portal.azure.com. Now I go to Logic Apps. I can see all of my Logic Apps, and let me open a sample Logic app. I'm on the Edge browser. I've opened the Logic app, and this is where I edit or I create my Logic app. I don't have to go to Visual Studio or anywhere. I can just do the development right here. As I was telling you, there are pre-configured shapes and actions and triggers that you can use. This is one of the actions, for example, when I receive an HTTP request. So I've dragged this shape here, and this becomes my API, basically. This is my API endpoint. I define a schema of what sort of payload I want to receive on this API. And then next, I'm giving this action that every time I receive any API, any request on this API, I want to send a message to a service bus queue or topic. You might not be familiar with service bus queue or topic, but consider this a messaging solution, right? It's somewhere a storage place where I'm sending that message, whatever request I received. And if I want to do anything next, I go to next step, and then here you can see there are all of these connectors. This is the connectors that I was talking about. These are out-of-the-box connectors that you can use without writing your own connection, right? These are some of the sample connectors for, you can use. There are some other connectors which are for the systems, for example, a SQL server, right? So if I wanted to insert whatever data I received into a SQL server, I can use this SQL server action. I can execute a query, I can run a stored procedure, anything that I want to do, right? All of these services that can be connected using Logic Apps. Some of these you might be aware of, some of them might be new because there are so many new connectors being added every day. Right. Let me show you some of the enterprise connectors. This is what most enterprises use. For example, you have IBM system, you want to send this data to IBM. you can use this connector. If you are using SAP, you can use SAP connector to send your data to SAP. And for some reason, there is a customized system that you don't have connector available. You can write your own custom connectors very easily. Again, visually, you can write the custom connector and send that data. So this is as easy as it can get. You can add, let's say you want to add a parallel line, you want to add some sort of control or condition, right? That if this happens, then do this. You have all of these blocks available here. There are loops, there are scopes, everything is available on this Visual Designer. Let me open another logic app, a little complex rather. Again, this logic app might not make sense, but I'll try and explain you what's happening. This is a visually designed logic app where you receive a message in the queue, then try and catch block. You all might be familiar with try and catch block. Everything in programming, you have to capture anything that goes wrong, right? See, here is your try block. So as you can see, if I click on this, it expands on whatever has been configured underneath that, right? Here is a loop, right? So in the loop, if I click, you can see there is a condition. All of these are visually designed logic apps. There is one more condition here, right? So even though outside it looked just 4 steps, but there are so many things that's happening inside. And you can do all of this configuration or all of this development, without writing a single line of code. Sometimes you may have to write some basic code, but most of these things are done with low code or no code technologies. So you don't have to learn a particular programming language to be able to write logic apps. Now, while we are doing all of this designing, what's happening behind the scenes is it's generating the code as you design and you configure. You can see this is the code base. This is the code that otherwise you would have to write manually. But instead of writing that code, they've given us this Visual Designer. It's much easier for anyone to learn and start writing your logic apps. I'm not going in a lot of technical details, but if you have any questions about this, let me know right now. Any questions about what is logic app or how does it work? Okay, seems like it's pretty self-explanatory. So let's move on to the next area. Look at the career opportunities, right? If you are as Dhanas research is getting back from a career break, you might be switching your career. As Spurti said, she's just finished her studies and she's kind of looking into getting into the job market, right? So whenever you're doing this, you want to make sure that there are enough career opportunities, and not just now, but in the upcoming future as well, right? So just as a random person who is looking to build career on integrations, let's go to Google and let's search for jobs, right? So we have audience, Smriti is from UK, Dhanasri, you're from India, right?
Yeah, but currently in London. Yeah.
Oh, you're also in London. Excellent. Okay. Vikas, you're from India, or are you in UK as well? And Sai, I believe you're in US, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Ronak, I'm assuming he's also in India. Vidhi has joined us. Vidhi will come back to you later on. So let's go to Google and let's just search for jobs, right? So I'll search for Azure integration jobs in the UK, and Google has a very good job search engine. So let's just go there. Okay, so here you can see there are plenty of jobs, plenty of companies looking for Azure integration engineers, right? And the pay is relatively good, really good. This is possibly for the full-time jobs, but if you're able to do contracting, the contracting rates for Azure integration engineers goes more than 500-600 pounds a day. But you can see there are plenty of opportunities coming up in the Azure integration developer role. Now, Sai would agree with me if 5 years, 10 years ago, if you're Bistock integration developer and if you searched for a job in Bistock, there would be 1 or 2 new job openings probably every month, because only very limited companies were able to use those costly technologies. Now, because of Azure, because of the pay-per-use plans, a lot of small and mid-level companies are also using Azure for their integration. And that is why we are seeing so many new jobs coming up in every market, right? Just for the sake, let's also search for a job in New York, Azure integration jobs in New York, right? There are, you can see architect level jobs, integration developer jobs. A lot of these jobs are also remote nowadays after COVID. So there are plenty of jobs available in the market. If you were to acquire this skill and do some hands-on exercise to kind of familiarize yourself on a real life project, you would be aiming at some really good jobs, and there are not good enough resources available in the market. Let me tell you that. We want to hire, in my company, we always are looking for good integration developers. We always struggle finding them. And any other companies where I've worked previously or I know the people, they're always looking for integration developers with good skills. This is a skill. If you learn this skill, probably after your first job, you would never have to look for a job. Jobs would come look for you. And this is my personal experience. Let's get back to the presentation. So these are some of the ways to confirm yourself that if you do decide to become an integration developer, there are plenty of job opportunities, and in future these are only going to grow. Okay. The next section is, if you become an integration developer, what is the future, right? And what are some other complementary skills and services? Now, both of these goes hands in hand. That's why I have them on the same slide. What I mean by complementary skills is that, let's take the case of Dhanasri, who's been working on Oracle databases, for example, right? So if you're working on the databases, you're working on databases for the entire career, because it's not easy to learn, for example, front-end development or back-end development or API development, being a database developer, right? Because there is a huge learning curve for you. And if you change that skill, your previous skill would probably lose some of those skills, right? If Ronak, who is a .NET developer, right? If he's been doing .NET development, if tomorrow if he wants to become a database developer, you would have to go through a massive learning curve as well. But if you're on Azure, if you learn the services and skills that you need to become an integration developer, it's more than likely that there are so many other complementary skills with very little learning curve that you can expand your career boundaries a lot, right? One of the services is Power Platform. I don't know if any of you have heard Power Platform, but it's really booming out there. It's from Microsoft. It is the low code and no code application development. What Microsoft is motivating or encouraging companies is to, rather than focusing on hiring a lot of different developers, enable your citizens, enable your existing developers to start building applications. That is where Power Platform comes in. But if you are an integration developer already, it would be so much easier for you to learn Power Platform development, because there are so many similar skills. You know, it's like if you've used Microsoft Word and next day you open PowerPoint, you know where are all the menus, you know where are all the options and services, right? So it's so much easier for you to learn Power Platform if you already had the integration skills. The next one is containers. Now, all of you may have heard Kubernetes and containerized applications and Dockers and whatnot, right? It's a way to host your applications, create orchestrations around it, microservices and all. Again, you can easily learn this new extra skill to add in your CV. You're not an analytics developer, but if you knew integration, it would be very easy for you to learn something called Azure Synapse Analytics or Power BI Analytics. Because again, it relies on a lot of similar skills and functionalities. Now there is data engineering is another field that's booming up, right? In Azure, there is this service called Azure Data Factory that you can use to build pipelines to process batches of data in the cloud. Again, with the skills of integration development, you can very easily learn Data Factory. Maybe in a matter of a week or two, you can be an expert level data engineer yourself. Right. There are Azure functions which are, you can write code in your preference language. If you're a .NET developer, you can write .NET code, Python code, any other language on Azure functions, right? So these are just few of them. The latest one is OpenAI. So ChatGPT is out there. It's the buzzword lately, in this last few months. ChatGPT is using Azure infrastructure, and that is why Azure also has Azure OpenAI services. If you were integration developer, you would be able to build a ChatGPT-like service for yourself. You can use all of the existing AI functionalities. You can use Azure to train and build your models and services, or any smart chatbot services, anything, right? So if you become an integration developer, it's so much easier for you to then expand your skill set. And once you have more than one skills that is required in the market, that becomes, you kind of uncommoditize yourself, right? If there were all the integration developers, you were the only one who had more than one skills, you would all of a sudden become not comparable with anyone else. This is really important. And not just in this career, if you go in any career in future, make sure you have more than one skills that is required in the market. And they might be complementary, not complementary. But there is a high chances you can do that if you are getting on the Azure integration development role. This is pretty much all I wanted to cover. Before I go into some other sections, I want to have some time for questions and answers. So any questions, anything that you want to discuss before I go to the next slide?
So how governance and security is taking care in this whole workflow?
Sure. So Azure by default is compliant to almost every possible security mechanism all over the world. Right? There are many data and privacy related issues, many regulations in different parts of the world. In the UK and EU, we have this GDPR, in US, there are some other industry-wise security requirements as well. Azure comes out of the box compliant with all of the security standards in the world. Now, you can have your own security built on top of all of your services. For example, if you're building an API, let's say, let me go back to the other logic app, which was an API. Okay, so this is an API where I'm receiving the HTTP request, right? I can have any type of security that I want on top of this logic app. I can use API management. I can define my security standards or levels, username, password, OAuth 2.0, or any other, tokens or any security mechanism that you can think of, you can use and implement on top of any Azure services, right? Some of the things that come out of the box, for example, if you used API management, I'm not sure if you're familiar with API management technologies, but API management is kind of a facade before your API so that you can control all the security, all the access and everything. Let's say you built an API and someone is out there, a bad actor who writes a bot to overload your API and sending you 1,000 requests per second. Azure has the mechanism that you can configure using some of the security services, that it would automatically detect that there is a bot, acting as a bad actor and stop that attack. You obviously have to configure that, but all of these services are available on Azure. Now, are you asking for any specific context?
Yeah. I mean, you pay what you use. In
Yeah.
this, it comes as a default services, or these are the extra cost. Some of these services, security and governance.
So yes, there are additional costs for every service that you use when it comes to Azure platform as a services.
Mm-hmm.
But these are quite less, insignificant cost a lot of times. For example, if you had API management and if you configured a particular security mechanism, it would give you like 1 million transactions would cost you few dollars, something like that, right? So there are different levels of security, and you can configure that at different levels as well.
Mm-hmm. Because see, why I asked in SaaS, Oracle SaaS, so there is one another dedicated service for this, and it's, yeah, of course it is very costly.
Yeah.
That's when you need to update every 4 months or so. That's why.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are all the traditional mechanisms are available. You can create your own VNet. You can have IP restrictions. You can have tokens being refreshed every few minutes or every few hours, so that it's not reused or used for any bad attacks. We have a question from Ronak. Okay. As a .NET developer, how can I start building your career in cloud integration? So Ronak, in the very next slide, I'm going to give you some path that you can follow. But if you're already a .NET developer, it's a good thing because it's all Microsoft framework, right? So if you're a .NET developer, it would be easier for you to get onto Azure learning. For example, if you have to build Azure function, you can start using your .NET skills to build any services on Azure functions. If you were to build some mapping, for example, you can use some of your .NET, code, not exactly the code, but the way you write your syntax on Azure Logic Apps. So it's much easier for any Microsoft developers to get on to Azure. Not to say that for others it's difficult. Yeah. Any other questions? Sai, any questions from you?
I don't have any specific questions at this level. So
Okay. Sure. Okay. So moving on, there are some next steps that you can take, right? The idea of this workshop was to give you the introduction of Azure cloud integrations and show you that there is a really great career if you are switching or building your career on Azure. There are a lot of career options, right? So hopefully I've conveyed that to you. If you are happy and if you want to take the next steps, just as Ronak asked, right? I want to give you some guidance of what you can do as your next steps. Now, these are not in a particular order. You can do all of them or you can do some of them. But if you do any of them, you would be really getting onto the Azure market, and it's a really lucrative market. So let's look at the options that you have. Okay, first of all, I'll obviously promote myself. I have a YouTube channel called Learn 360, LURN 360. So if you go to YouTube and if you search for Learn 360, you would find my playlist called Azure Cloud Integrations 101. And I have about 45 videos that covers all of the different services, not just Logic Apps, but Service Bus, API management, Azure functions. And I consider about 3 different real-time or real business scenarios, and we build integrations together. So if you follow this path, you can at least get started. Now, I had built these videos a couple of years ago, so some of the UI may have changed. So you may have to work with that, but you can easily get started with this. This should be your first step. Second is Microsoft has provided a really good learning content this time around. Now, Microsoft is not known for this learning content for, historically, but this time around with Azure, they've worked very hard and given you a lot of learning content for free. But that you have to go to Microsoft Learn, which is learn.microsoft.com. And you can filter that for different certifications or different levels, different roles. I would strongly suggest you to get started with AZ900 certification. And once you've done that, go for the DP900 certification. Now, when you search for this certification, there is a learning path and you can step by step go through each chapter. There are a lot of videos, there are a lot of reading, there are a lot of interactive exercises as well. So you can actually learn everything for free, right, on Microsoft Learn. Now, these two are certifications. Now, I am very, careful when I ask people to prepare for this, because a lot of times our psychology is that, okay, just certifications, I have to pass that exam. And whenever we have to take any exam, we start looking for resources that help me pass the exam, right? So that's not the case for career, right? In the college or in the school, that was fine. But when you're learning to build your career, don't look for resources or kind of question dumps that can help you pass the exam. Certification is not mandatory to get the job. It will help you, but it's not mandatory. Knowledge is, right? I have plenty of certifications. I've never posted them on my LinkedIn or Twitter anywhere, right? So certifications, if you have, it's good. It's not mandatory. Focus on acquiring the knowledge for these 2 exams, and it's all for free on Microsoft Learn. If you've done these 2 or either of them, then start looking for internship opportunities. Now, this is for the beginners. So for example, either Vikas or Spurti can look for internship opportunities for companies which are focused on Microsoft technologies near you, right? A lot of these companies, including the company where I work for, we look for resources who are interested in learning Microsoft technologies. We hire them as interns or grads. We train them for a few months, right? So pretty much every company hires interns. So you can, this is one of the options if you're just getting started with your career. Now, another option is I teach online cohort-based courses, right? These are, if I'm not sure if you're familiar with cohort-based courses, but these are online live classes, not like a Udemy course or a YouTube playlist where you do everything by yourself. Cohort-based courses are a small group of students who work with me on live class, just like this workshop, for a period of time where I teach them live all of this content in very much detail. And we go through hands-on exercises as well, right? So I teach a cohort-based course on different topics every month. Now my upcoming cohort for integration, it starts on 9th June next month in a couple of weeks time. This cohort is for 3 days. So 9th, 10th, and 11th June, I'll be teaching 3 hours every day. And it would be a very small group, less than 10 students in one group. Okay, so you will have a personal attention from me and other like-minded students. These are all live coaching in small groups, right? Here is the URL. Let me paste the URL in the chat so that you can save this as well. So you can go to this URL if you want to know more about my course. It costs £299, but because you spend some time with me today to learn about integrations, here is a discount coupon code for 30%. So if you prefer to take my course, which is again, if you don't like, I have a guarantee I'll give you all your money back, because if you're not benefiting from it, I don't need your money, right? You can use this coupon code SAVE30. You can get 30% off. It is only for the first 5 students, right? So if you're interested, please go ahead and check out this page. And if you want, you can learn with me next month. And I'll have some following cohort as well, right, in the upcoming months. But for the integration, the next one is coming in June. That's pretty much all I wanted to discuss today, and give you a little bit of knowledge from my side and help you, build your career on integration. Hopefully, you've got some value out of this. But understand this: this is a really good quote that I like from Malcolm X. It's a future belongs to those who prepare for it today, right? So if today people are talking about something, you're already late, right? If you want to build your future, do it for the next 5 to 10 years. Don't do it for today, right? So all the best if you want to get started with the YouTube channel or Microsoft Learn, or if you want to join me in this course, you're most welcome. Here are the ways you can reach out to me. This is my email address. On LinkedIn, please send me a connection request. I would really be interested in knowing you more. And if you're on Twitter, this is my Twitter handles. You can also follow me on Twitter. But I prefer LinkedIn and email. If there is anything, if you have any questions, even I'm not a company or a coaching institute, right? You can personally reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you need any other guidance in the field of Azure or technology or anything in general. Any questions before we close? Any questions? Anyone has any questions? Any feedback for me? All right, That sounds like no questions. I may have done either good job or terrible job. All right, here's my number. I'll put my number in the chat. So if you want to reach out to me either by phone or by WhatsApp, please feel free to do that. And I'll be happy to connect with you either on LinkedIn or Twitter. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day. Have a good weekend.